Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. I had always imagined that if my marriage ever hit a rough patch, I would know. You think you'd feel it, right? A subtle shift in the air between you and the person you share your life with, something off in their eyes, or in the way they say, "I love you." But that's the thing about trust, it makes you blind. And I trusted Jess completely. I thought we were happy. It was a Friday night, late. I had stayed at work longer than usual, trying to finish up a project so I could spend the weekend with Jess and Charlie without work looming over me. Jess had texted earlier saying she was having a girls' night in, just catching up with one of her friends, Sarah. I hadn't thought much of it. Jess often spent time with her friends. We had always given each other space like that, part of what I thought made our relationship strong. I pushed open the front door quietly, careful not to wake Charlie, who had probably fallen asleep hours ago. I could hear Jess upstairs, her voice carrying faintly down the hallway. It was late, almost midnight, but she was still on the phone. That wasn't unusual either. Jess was a night owl. I had always been the one who crashed early. I headed toward the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and was about to settle on the couch when I realized my phone was still upstairs on the charger. I sighed, rubbing my eyes as exhaustion tugged at me, and decided to grab it before collapsing in front of the TV. As I walked up the stairs, Jess's voice grew louder. Her words were still muffled, but I could tell by the tone she was talking in that low, conspiratorial way she used with Sarah when they discussed personal things. I slowed my pace. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but something about the way she was talking made me hesitate. "I still can't believe I got away with it all," she was saying, her voice tinged with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. I stopped, my foot hovering over the next step. My heartbeat quickened, but I told myself it was nothing. I was just tired, hearing things wrong. I inched closer, quiet as possible. "That trip to Spain was the worst," Jess continued, and I could hear her laugh softly. "He was so passionate, you know. So different from Matt. And that accent. I couldn't resist." I blinked, my mind scrambling to process what I was hearing. Spain. Passion. What the hell was she talking about? Sarah's voice came through, faint but clear enough to understand. "I don't know how you managed it. Weren't you scared Matt would find out?" "Scared?" Jess scoffed. "Not really. He's so trusting. I'd come home, smile, kiss him on the cheek, and he wouldn't suspect a thing." I felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. My legs shook as I stood there, listening to my wife, the woman I had spent over a decade with, raised a son with, recount her infidelity like it was a casual story from a vacation. She sounded so distant, so detached from what those words meant to me, to our life. I could barely breathe as I strained to hear more. And Kevin. God, he was so young. It was such a rush, you know. I wasn't even planning it, but it just happened. It was exciting, feeling wanted like that again. Kevin. I had no idea who that was. My mind spun, trying to place a face with the name, but I came up blank. Jess had never mentioned anyone named Kevin, at least not to me. "How long did that one last?" Sarah asked, her voice curious, like this was the juiciest gossip she'd heard all week. "A few months," Jess replied. "He was so energetic. It wasn't serious, but it was fun." I felt bile rising in my throat. My hand clutched the banister as I fought the urge to barge into the room and demand answers right then and there. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was frozen, stuck between disbelief and a growing sense of horror. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone with shaky hands. Without thinking, I hit the record button. I needed proof that this wasn't just a bad dream or some misunderstanding. I needed to hear it again, to know for sure. Jess continued talking, oblivious to the fact that her secrets were unraveling just outside the door. "Do you ever feel guilty?" Sarah asked after a moment, her tone more subdued. There was a pause, and for a second, I wondered if Jess would say something that would give me a glimmer of hope, some shred of decency that might make this all less unbearable. But her answer came, cold and without hesitation. Guilty, she repeated. Not really. I mean, what Matt doesn't know won't hurt him, right? I felt my stomach twist. I wanted to scream, to yell, to break something, but I couldn't move. Every part of me was locked in place, like I was tethered to this moment in time. The woman I loved was calmly explaining how little I mattered, how easy it had been to lie to me for years. Jess went on, but I had stopped hearing the words. My mind was drowning in a flood of emotions, rage, betrayal, heartbreak, all colliding into a numb, overwhelming ache. I stood there for what felt like hours, listening but not really listening anymore, just waiting for it to end. Finally, I heard the phone call end with a click. Jess sighed, probably stretching out in bed like she had just shared a harmless secret with her best friend. But it wasn't harmless. It was a knife, and it had gutted me completely. I backed away from the door, the weight of the recording in my pocket like a ticking time bomb. I had proof now. I had the truth. But knowing it didn't make it easier. It only made it more real, more unbearable. I stumbled back downstairs, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the quiet of the house. The walls seemed to close in around me, every memory we'd built in this place suddenly tainted by her lies. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall in the dark, the recording still playing in my head. Jess's voice, cold and indifferent, was all I could hear. What Matt doesn't know won't hurt him. But now I knew. And it hurt more than I could have ever imagined. The morning after the revelation, I was a man caught in the eye of a storm. Every movement was mechanical, as if my body had taken over while my mind struggled to process the wreckage of my life. Jess, blissfully unaware of the chaos she had wrought, was her usual self, preparing breakfast with an easy smile and a cheerful, "Good morning." "Coffee?" she asked, placing a steaming mug in front of me. Her demeanor was so calm, so normal, it made my heart ache with anger and disbelief. I stared at the mug, my hands clenched into fists on my lap. I had barely slept, and my mind was a jumbled mess of emotions, betrayal, sadness, and a seething rage. I had the recording, the evidence of her lies and infidelities, and now I had to confront her. I wasn't even sure where to begin. "Jess, we need to talk," I said finally, my voice rough with the strain of keeping my emotions in check. She looked up from her coffee, her brow furrowing in concern. "Sure, what's wrong?" I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to shout. "It's about last night. I heard everything." Her face went through a series of emotions, confusion, realization, and then a creeping fear. "Heard what?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Jess's voice filled the room, recounting her affairs in vivid detail. Her laughter and casual remarks about the men she had been with, her nonchalant attitude about the betrayal, it all came crashing down around us. Jess's face paled as she listened, her eyes widening with horror. "Matt, shut up," I said, cutting her off. My voice was cold, a stark contrast to the hurt I felt. "I don't want to hear excuses. I want to know how you could do this to me. To us. I didn't mean for you to find out like this," Jess said, her voice trembling. It was a mistake. A mistake," I said, incredulous. "It wasn't just one mistake, Jess. It was a pattern. You were unfaithful to me over and over again. And you lied to my face, day in and day out." "I was unhappy," Jess said, tears beginning to streak down her face. "I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I thought I could fix things without hurting you." "Fix things?" I repeated, my voice rising. "How is sleeping with other men supposed to fix anything? It's not just the cheating, Jess. It's the lies. It's the way you used me and our family as a front while you were living another life. I didn't want to hurt you," she said, sobbing now. I thought I could make things better. I was wrong, I see that now. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. The weight of her betrayal was crushing, and I struggled to keep my composure. Did you ever think about how your actions would affect us? How they would destroy everything we've built together? Jess shook her head, her shoulders shaking with the force of her sobs. No. I didn't. I was selfish. I'm sorry. I truly am. You're sorry. I said bitterly. That's not enough. Not nearly enough. Charlie came wandering into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, his face full of sleep. He looked between us, sensing the tension in the room. What's going on, Dad? I looked at my son, my heart breaking. He had been so innocent, so unaware of the turmoil beneath the surface. I crouched down to his level, trying to keep my voice steady. Nothing, Charlie. Just grown-up stuff. Jess, still crying, reached out to Charlie. Hey, sweetie, why don't you go back to bed? I'll be done here soon. Charlie hesitated, then looked up at me, his eyes full of confusion. Is Mom okay? She's not feeling well, I said, my voice catching. Why don't you go get some more rest, okay? We'll talk later. Charlie nodded slowly, still unsure, and went back to his room. I watched him go, my heart aching at the thought of how this would affect him. I turned back to Jess, my anger resurfacing. You've shattered everything, I said quietly, but with a steely resolve. I can't do this anymore. I'm filing for divorce. Jess's face crumpled, her sobs turning into desperate pleas. Matt, please. Don't do this. We can work it out. I'll do anything. I've heard enough, I said, feeling an icy resolve settle over me. I can't stay in this. Not after everything I've heard. I need to move on, and I need you to understand that. She sank to her knees, her cries echoing in the empty kitchen. I turned and walked away, unable to bear the sight of her brokenness but knowing it was a consequence of her own actions. I walked out of the house, the cool morning air hitting my face like a slap. The pain was still there, raw and fierce, but I had made a decision. I had to be strong for myself and for Charlie. The road ahead would be tough, but I was determined to face it, to rebuild and to find some semblance of peace. As I drove away, leaving the life I had known behind, the recording on my phone felt like a heavy anchor, proof of the past, but also a reminder that I needed to move forward. Jess's tears and apologies were fading into the background as I focused on the road ahead, a road that led to an uncertain but necessary new beginning. The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of legal papers, emotional wreckage, and the dull, unending ache of betrayal. The divorce proceedings were swift, but the emotional fallout was anything but. Jess had done more than just break my trust, she had shattered the foundation of our lives, and the ripple effects were felt deeply. Our son, Charlie, struggled with the transition. He had always been close to Jess, and suddenly, she was no longer a constant presence in his life. The separation was hard on him, and I did everything I could to shield him from the worst of it. He'd ask questions that I couldn't always answer, questions that made my heart ache every time he looked at me with those innocent, confused eyes. One evening, as I was tucking Charlie into bed, he looked up at me with a mixture of sadness and confusion. Dad, why can't Mom come home? I swallowed hard, sitting on the edge of his bed, my heart breaking. Charlie, your mom and we're not together anymore. Sometimes, adults have problems that they can't fix, and this was one of those times. But why? Charlie asked, his voice small. I don't understand. I know it's confusing, I said softly, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. It's because of things that happened before, things that we can't change. But what you need to know is that I'm here for you. I'll always be here. Charlie nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. I miss her. I know you do, I said, my own voice catching. I miss her too. But we're going to get through this together, okay? We're a team. He nodded, though the sadness in his eyes didn't completely fade. I kissed him goodnight and left his room, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. The divorce had not only affected Charlie but had also strained my relationships with my own family. My parents, who had once been close to Jess, were furious with her. They couldn't understand how someone who seemed so loving could have caused such pain. Their anger was palpable when we spoke. I went to their house one afternoon, hoping for some comfort, but instead, found myself facing their disappointment. "Matt, we can't believe she did this to you," my mother said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You didn't deserve this." "I know, Mom," I said, trying to keep my own emotions in check. "But it's over now. I need to move forward. I just don't understand how she could do this to our family," my father added, his face hard. "It's not just about you, Matt. It's about Charlie too." "I know," I said, feeling the sting of their judgment. "And that's why I'm doing everything I can to make this easier for him. I need to figure out how to do that." "You're doing your best," my mother said, reaching out to touch my arm. "But don't forget, you need to take care of yourself too. This isn't just about Charlie." Their words were well-intentioned, but they did little to ease the heavy burden I was carrying. Jess's actions had not only damaged our relationship but had created a rift between her and everyone who had once supported her. Jess had tried to reach out, sending text messages and emails, but I had ignored them all. I couldn't bring myself to engage with her, it was too painful. I knew she wanted to reconcile, but reconciliation seemed impossible. The damage was too deep, and trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. One afternoon, I got a call from Jess's lawyer. "Matt, Jess wanted me to reach out. She's asking for a chance to see Charlie. She's really struggling, and she wants to explain things to him." I felt a surge of anger and frustration. I don't know if that's a good idea. Charlie's still trying to understand what happened, and seeing Jess might confuse him even more. "I understand your concerns," the lawyer said calmly. "But Jess is willing to meet with you first, to discuss how she might approach this." I agreed to meet with Jess, though I had no idea what to expect. We arranged to meet in a neutral location, a small cafe where we could talk without the pressure of home or family. When I saw her, she looked haggard, her eyes red and tired. She had clearly been through a lot since the divorce, and seeing her like this was a stark contrast to the confident woman I had once known. "Matt," she said, her voice cracking. "Thank you for meeting me." "Let's just get to it," I said, feeling the weight of our shared history press down on me. "What do you want to say?" "I want to see Charlie," she said, her voice pleading. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you and him. But I want to make things right. I need him to know that I still love him, even if we can't be together." "I don't know if that's possible," I said, my voice firm. "Charlie's still processing everything. I don't want to force him into something he's not ready for." "I understand," Jess said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I just want a chance to explain, to show him that I still care. Please, Matt. I'm asking for one chance." I saw the desperation in her eyes, but I also saw the reality of the situation. Jess had broken our family, and no amount of apologies or explanations could undo that. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the decision. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But I need to be sure it's right for Charlie. He needs to come first." Jess nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. I appreciate it." I left the cafe with a heavy heart. The road ahead was uncertain, and the pain of the past still lingered. But I knew I had to focus on what was best for Charlie and find a way to navigate this new reality, one step at a time. Back home, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Charlie, even as my own heart was still in turmoil. The process of moving on was slow and painful, but with each day, I hoped for a better future, a future where trust could be rebuilt and healing could begin. The first few months after the divorce were a blur of legal battles, emotional strain, and trying to rebuild a life from the fragments left behind. The house that had once been filled with laughter and love now felt like a hollow shell. Charlie and I had moved into a small apartment, a modest space that seemed to symbolize the fresh start we both desperately needed. I had found a new job in a different city, far from the painful memories of our old life. It was a fresh start, an opportunity to begin again. The work was fulfilling, and the change of scenery was a welcome distraction from the constant reminders of the past. The new job was challenging but rewarding, and I found solace in the routine and the sense of accomplishment it brought. Charlie, too, was adjusting. He had a new school and new friends, and although he missed his old life, he was beginning to find his footing. I made sure to keep our routine consistent, dinners together, bedtime stories, and weekend outings. It wasn't the life we had planned, but it was a life that we were building together, and that gave me hope. One Saturday morning, as we were having breakfast, Charlie looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Dad, can we go to the park today?" I smiled, relieved to see him wanting to engage in normal activities. "Sure, buddy. That sounds like a great idea. We can pack a picnic and spend the whole day there." Charlie's face lit up with a genuine smile. "Awesome. Can we invite some of the kids from my new school?" I was pleasantly surprised. "Of course. I'm sure they'd love to join us." We spent the morning preparing for the picnic, packing sandwiches, fruit, and Charlie's favorite snacks. When we arrived at the park, Charlie's new friends greeted him with enthusiasm, and I watched with a mix of pride and relief as he interacted with them, laughing and playing. As the day went on, I took a moment to sit on a bench and watch Charlie from a distance. He was having fun, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. I knew that the road ahead was still uncertain, but seeing Charlie happy and engaged made it all worthwhile. Later that evening, after the kids had gone home and Charlie was winding down for bed, he came to me with a thoughtful look. "Dad, do you think things will always be this way?" I sat down beside him on his bed, trying to choose my words carefully. "What do you mean, Charlie?" "Well, are we always going to live here and have new friends and stuff?" he asked, his eyes full of curiosity. I thought for a moment, considering the question. "I hope that we can keep moving forward and finding new ways to be happy. Life changes, and sometimes things don't turn out the way we expect, but we have to make the best of what we have. And as long as we're together, we can handle anything." Charlie nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. "Okay, Dad. I'm glad we're together." "Me too, Charlie," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "We're a team, and that's what matters." As Charlie drifted off to sleep, I took a moment to reflect on how far we had come. The pain of the past was still there, but it was beginning to fade into the background as we forged a new path forward. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, the apartment began to feel more like home. The old house had been sold, and with the proceeds, I had managed to put some money aside for Charlie's future. The new job was going well, and I felt like I was finally starting to find my footing again. One day, I received an unexpected call from Jess's lawyer. "Matt, Jess wanted me to let you know that she's been working on making some changes in her life. She's in counseling and trying to rebuild her relationships, including the one with Charlie." I listened, my emotions a tangled mess. "And what does that mean for us?" "Jess would like the opportunity to meet with you and Charlie," the lawyer said gently. "She wants to talk about a potential visitation arrangement, something that would be in Charlie's best interest." I considered the proposal carefully. It was a difficult decision, fraught with the potential for emotional upheaval. But I knew that Charlie needed to make his own decisions about his mother, and I had to be open to that possibility. I agreed to meet with Jess, setting up a time at a family counseling center where a neutral mediator could help facilitate the discussion. When the day arrived, I took Charlie with me, his small hand gripping mine as we entered the building. Jess was already there, looking nervous but hopeful. Her appearance was less disheveled than before, and there was a sincerity in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. "Matt," Jess said, her voice shaky. "Charlie. Thank you for coming." Charlie looked up at me, seeking reassurance. I nodded, encouraging him to speak if he wanted to. Jess knelt down to Charlie's level, her eyes filled with tears. "Charlie, I'm really sorry for everything. I know I hurt you, and I want to make things right. I want to be part of your life again, if you're willing." Charlie hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I miss you, Mom. But I'm still sad about everything." "I understand," Jess said, her voice breaking. "And I'll do everything I can to earn back your trust. I know it won't be easy, but I'm committed to working on it." The mediator spoke up, guiding us through the discussion. We talked about a gradual visitation plan, starting with supervised visits and slowly increasing the time as Charlie became more comfortable. It was a step towards healing, a small but significant gesture that could help mend the fractures in our family. As we left the counseling center, Charlie looked up at me with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Dad, do you think things will be okay?" "I think we're taking a step in the right direction," I said, smiling down at him. "It's going to take time, but we're working on it together. And that's what matters." With Jess's efforts to rebuild her life and our own fresh start in a new city, I began to feel a sense of cautious optimism. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but we were moving forward, one step at a time. And as we faced the future, I knew that while the past would always be a part of us, we had the strength to create a new beginning, filled with hope and possibility.